What's up? Today we're going to look at how to write a doom metal song, as in Black Sabbath, Pagan Altar, Trouble, and Pentagram, not the music made by Mick Gordon for the game Doom. Imagine that your job is to create the sound of the moment that time slows down right before something awful happens. Like a comet about to hit the ground, a volcano going off, or realizing that you're surrounded by fire and there's no escape. If you bring this intention into your songwriting process, you're going to lean towards the normal sounds of the doom metal genre. In this video, we're going to start by looking at the tonal elements, the rhythms, the tempos, and the best scales to use, and then we're going to move on to some riff creation, which will lead to us writing a song. But first, here's a taste of what I got. Doom metal songs are typically slow, heavy, dissonant, and long as fuck. But where do we start? I think the best place to start is with tone, because the right tone will guide you. In addition to that, if you're hearing the right tone, it's really easy to know if your note choice or your chord progression or whatever it is also correct. For guitars, we want some gnarly distortion. Think fuzzers, octavers, and high gain amps. For amps, something like an Orange Rockverb is going to be far better suited than a JMC 800. The tone that I've used is from Neural DSP Granifier, and the preset is called Black and White. However, any type of fuzz pedal or fuzz plugin in front of a high gain amp is going to be most of the sound that you're after anyway. And free options can be found with Neural Amp Modeler. Bass is simple. Get something equally as earth-shattering as the guitar tone. You're allowed to use fuzzers and octavers on the bass as well. Just make sure that they complement each other. You don't want a tone that you can't hear the bass or the guitar with. Equally, you don't want a tone where they just sound like they're not fitting right. Doesn't matter which one you choose first, but once again, just make sure that they fit together well. For drums, we want something that sounds pretty natural, as in a drummer playing in a room. Leave the imperfections in timing and hits and whatever else happens in the mix. Use compression or distortion or both, but we do not want the overprocessed hypermetal drums that we hear in so many mixes and genres these days. And keep in mind that most other genres put the drums right up the front of the mix with the vocals, whereas with Doom, it sits somewhere in the midground or the background. Now, after we've established the band sound, you can use synths and other effects and whatever you want in your song as well. But I want to encourage you here to let these choices represent your personality. The addition of a harmonica or a theremin or a flute will help you stand out within the genre. For vocals, if you choose to include them, it's entirely your decision. Lots of Doom features singing, screaming, or growling, and plenty of it features all three. The only bit of advice that I want to guide you towards is make sure that it complements the tones you've already gone for. You're more likely going to want a vocal tone that is heavy and devastating rather than a beautiful falsetto thing. However, if you want to do a beautiful falsetto thing, please do that too. As I said at the start, these songs are slow as fuck, like 60 to 100 BPM, and halftime feels are not only welcome but encouraged. The example song that I wrote for this video is 68 BPM with a halftime feel, glacially slow. For time signatures, the most important thing to do is to set up the groove. I advise staying with 4/4 or 6/8 because these time signatures invite repetition. This genre is similar to trance in that way, where you establish one or two ideas and then you just kind of go, and all of a sudden as a listener, a fair few minutes have just dissolved into nothing. If you want to try a more complex time signature, please do it, but just remember that if the groove is jarring, it's going to take you out of that trance-like effect. For the scale and note choice, we want a minor mode and we want to feature the tritone. It doesn't matter which minor mode you choose, and you can change from one minor mode to another within the same riff. All you need to do is choose one minor mode, get started, and make sure that you visit the tritone. Beyond that, just let your ear guide you. And before we get on to riff creation, one of the most important parts that isn't spoken about that much is the use of space. Letting chords ring out, holding on to dissonances, or leaving literally empty space all achieve this same goal. The point is these gaps give your brain time to catch up and think about what it's just experienced. Faster music has the intention of overwhelming the listener. Your brain spends its time just trying to keep up with what's actually happening, which is great for our current attention spans. But with Doom, you really want to invite that contemplation and then let it take over. For example, any movie that has the death of an important character in a war scene, the scenes usually go something like there's absolute chaos going on everywhere, and then bam, death. Slow-mo, micro expressions. All these seconds that feel like eternity are baked into the experience so that it can give your brain a chance to catch up and say, fuck. This is a visual way of utilizing space. In Doom, you want to try and elicit that same sensation. So let's start writing some music. Idea 1 is the statement riff. I think it's really important at the start of a Doom song to make a statement. This is what you're in for. There can be an intro leading up to it, that's no worries, but you want to give your listeners something to connect to. Within a few seconds of this riff starting, you get a vibe for the whole song. You can clearly hear the tonal ideas that I've gone for. You've got slow, heavy doom headed your way, and it's complemented with heaps of space, so you can buy into the emotion that I want you to feel. And what more can I say that hasn't already been said? The riff is a minor mode and it visits the tritone. The purpose of this riff is to provide us with a launchpad. When you hear the song at the end of this video, I do play this riff twice, but when I revisit it, I put in a simple lead line over the top. If I were adding vocals to my track, then I would use this riff as the verse riff. I would probably simplify it or at least make it less devastating so that the vocals have a bigger space where they can bring on that devastation as well. Idea 2 is the climax. For the next idea, I needed something that would pick up where the statement riff left off and climax the song. There are two main things that make this riff climax. Obviously, the near 2 seconds of silence builds massive amounts of anticipation, but also I went to higher notes. As much as tritones are featured in this genre, so are octaves. If I want my riff to climax, one really simple way to do that is just make the next riff go higher. My statement riff doesn't go as high as the octave. So if I want a climax, I'm going to go to the octave. Aside from that, once again, the scale is a conglomeration of minor modes that visits the tritone. The only other thing to note is that I wanted this section to feel like a build of energy. So in the riff, I built the drums up in anticipation for the silence. It doesn't matter that it builds up to silence because silence itself creates more anticipation. More anticipation means bigger climax. Simple. Idea number 3 is to increase energy. Realistically, the first two riffs cover most of what you need to write Doom music. But without something extra, it can feel stale. Use this riff to tie your whole song together. There are 3 main ways to increase energy. One is higher pitches, another is higher tempo, and another is a faster pulse. I didn't want to increase the tempo as I feel like 68 BPM is the perfect speed for my composition. So that left me with higher pitches and a faster pulse. What I did differently in this section is pretty simple. Number 1, there is a notable lack of space. The longest chord in this section lasts 1.5 beats. As opposed to the 2.5 beat rest from riff 2 and the 4.5 beat chord from riff 1. Number 2 is I didn't play any open strings because the other 2 riffs had already done that. Aside from that, the approach is mostly the same as the first 2 riffs. My goal with riff 2 and 3 was to create something that juxtaposes what we'd heard before. The more we can step away with these simple and potentially subtle things, the more we move emotion. A few small changes can lead to a large difference in perception. If you change too many things, you can run the risk of your song sounding a bit disconnected unless you transition very carefully. My advice is to listen in context and let your ear guide you. You're going to find so many different options that work. But if you're too analytical about it, you can end up with the 2 different sections that don't quite work together. Now, there's one final trick that I used here that you should be aware of. Riff 2 and 3 are actually kind of similar. Riff 1 is different. If the song went from riff 2 straight into riff 3, then it wouldn't be that obvious of a change of section. So to combat that, in my song structure, I went from riff 1 to riff 2, back to riff 1 with a variation, and then to riff 3. Playing with your structure like this is a really good way to get more bang for your buck out of your song. Idea 4 is the clean idea. There are 3 obvious choices to use for your clean ideas. Number 1 is whatever you think sounds good. Number 2 is something that complements a riff that we've already heard, like a clean melodic line that goes over the top of this riff. Number 3 is a deconstructed riff. I chose to deconstruct the main riff. This is done by taking the important rhythms and notes and putting enough variation into it so that it's not identical, but so that one can easily lead into another. Troubleshooting. If you find that you've written something and potentially got a solid foundation for the song, but it doesn't quite feel doom metal, there's 2 problems that might have happened. Things like the tone, the tempo, and the scale are hugely important. Just make sure that whatever you're choosing there is within the norms of the genre. If those things don't work, I want to bring you back to the start of the video. We discussed intentions in songwriting at that point. What I want you to do is actively listen to the section of song that you're not liking and ask yourself questions similar to what I'm about to ask. Does this riff sound gargantuan? Does it weigh as much as the sun? Is it a suitable sound for a planet-destroying comet moments before impact? Does it sound earth-shattering? These questions are essentially the same, and please change them to something that is more suited to your situation or the vibe that you're going for. But to me, they're all about powerlessness. However, if I asked you about powerlessness, it speaks to your logical brain. We want our music to emotionally affect our listeners. If you, as the writer, can't connect your riff with a comet that's about to destroy Earth, then you need to rewrite your riff. I'm not saying that every single riff needs to be absolutely earth-destroying, but this is doom metal. There has to be some element of that within the track. So there you have it. If you have any questions or disagreements, please leave them in the comments down below. Also, if you'd like me to hit any other genre or a specific artist, please ask that below as well. To finish this video off, here's the doom metal track in its entirety that I wrote for this video. Hopefully you can see the connection between what we've discussed here and the final result that I got. See you next time.